Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there, and rather chilly weekend here in the UK. It's been a bit colder and a bit darker and a bit wetter over the past few days, and it looks like that is set to continue. I think winter is finally starting to set in after the wonderful, hot, a glorious summer that we've had here. But of course, you're not just here for the weather, you're also here for some retro news. And there is a bit of a correction to a story that I talked about last week that I just want to very briefly mention. Thank you to Mateus Bayes for pointing this out to me. Of course, the esteemed Sega Mega Drive / Genesis developer that you are. He has his own YouTube channel and stuff, which of course I will link down below, working on a very interesting looking game at the moment. But the important thing here is there is something very important to note about this Lego controller that I talked about last week, this Lego Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, if you prefer, controller. And if we just pop back over to the Lego website, there is a message that has appeared on here that wasn't here last week for some reason. We had the price of $16.99. I think it was crossed out last week when I recorded that part, but as you can see, this other part has now been added with a purchase of £115 or more, excluding pre-orders while stocks last. So this is actually a gift with purchases, with other purchases. It's not at $16.99 in its own right. So apologies for that. It did seem absurdly cheap for what it is, and that certainly explains that. So thank you once more to Matt for pointing that out. Let's get on with the rest of this week's ramble. As you will full well know if you have been following me for any length of time, I am a huge fan of all things Atari. Everything going all the way back to their earliest stuff in the early 1970s, right up to even the modern incarnation of Atari. I think they're actually doing surprisingly well just lately, and they've put out some quite interesting looking products, which, to be honest, surprised me as much as anyone. But one of those products that I have been following for quite some time now, this was first announced well over a year ago, is now finally available for pre-order. And this looks like a very interesting device indeed. So I wanted to just take the opportunity to take another look at this. So this is the Atari GameStation Go. And as we can see on the Atari website, we have a price listed now, which is $179.99. And it took me far too long to work this out, but if you scroll right to the bottom of the page, there is actually a currency/language selector here, tucked away at the bottom of the page, and you can change this to GBP. Go on, there we go. And so the price in British pounds is £134.69. Now, I do know someone in the UK who has actually tried to pre-order one of these, and it's coming up as saying that it's not available in our region. So who knows what's going on with that? I think Amazon UK are kind of the official distributor here, or at least they certainly have been for the 2600 plus and the 7800 plus. So maybe that's the case with this. I don't know. Anyway, let's take a look at the hardware. So, this is a collaboration with a company called My Arcade, who have worked with Atari on a few different projects in the past, on some handhelds and some mini consoles and stuff like that. They also do kind of other licensed consoles. I think they did like a Namco one maybe at one point. I don't know. But this is particularly noteworthy because of the controls that are available on it. So as we'll see in a moment, this supports quite the extensive back catalogue of Atari games. And of course, with all of that arcade history and all of their weird and wonderful controllers over the years, that does mean that they need to support quite the range of inputs. And that's exactly what they are attempting to do here. So at first glance, you might be forgiven for thinking that this is a pretty standard-looking handheld, although you might notice the keypad on the side, of course, very reminiscent of stuff like the 5200 and the Jaguar. They had those controller overlays, of course, didn't they, that you could slip on top of the controller, adding a load of extra buttons and inputs, which was very innovative for its time. We've got shoulder buttons on here. We've got a D-pad, as you might expect, and we've got the standard A, B, X, and Y buttons. But taking a bit of a closer look, just trying to find a better picture. Here we go. So on the top left here, we have a spinner, or a rotary input, a rotary controller, driving controller, a paddle, whatever you want to call it, for all of those games, that use that, like Breakout and stuff like that. My mind's going blank at the moment. There's loads of them. Underneath the D-pad on the left-hand side, we also have, tucked away here, if we can take a look at this photo, a trackball. So it has a trackball input as well for stuff like Missile Command. Of course, fantastic trackball game in the arcades. Very difficult to kind of replicate that. I mean, yeah, you can play it with a mouse or with an analog joystick or whatever, but it's not quite the same as playing the original arcade machine. So, yeah, this is a very kind of authentic experience, I think. And that's why I'm quite excited about this console. Of course, it also has the shoulder buttons and things that you might expect from a handheld in this day and age. Nice big screen. I think it looks like a pretty cool thing all round. So let's take a look at some of the information on the web page here. So of course it mentions some of the bundled games and things. There is a complete list which we'll take a look at in a second. Also that it includes a paddle, trackball, D-pad, bumpers, numeric keypad, and the classic gamepad buttons. And it also has a high-res 7-inch display, Wi-Fi connectivity, HDMI output, and USB-C ports. And of course, it has an internal rechargeable battery. So quite the array of specs there. And yeah, we'll just take a look at the description, shall we? The latest in Atari's collaboration with My Arcade, the GameStation Go blends retro gaming with modern features. The handheld console comes packed with over 200 built-in games, including arcade and home console favourites from Atari's massive library, along with officially licensed games from Pac-Man, Jaleco, and Pico International. The GameStation Go even includes 5 games from the Atari Recharged series and Balls of Steel for the first time on a My Arcade console. And it just goes on to talk about the controls. Now, one thing that it does add here in the description is that it includes something called Smart Glow technology, which I don't think I've seen this in action yet. But essentially, what it looks like this does is it actually illuminates the controls that work with each game. So, of course, this comes pre-configured to use the correct input for whatever game you happen to be playing. And that will actually illuminate to let you know which controls you need to be using to control that game, which that's quite a nice touch, actually. Yeah, I'm really surprised by how much thought and has gone into this, I guess. It's not just another kind of a cheap cash grab, I don't think, by the looks of it. Like I say, modern day Atari, surprising me all the time with all this weird stuff. So, of course, we've gone over the features. We've got the 200 games, we've got the 7-inch display and the controls and all of that wonderful stuff. 4 to 5 hours of playtime on the internal battery there. And the availability here, shipping in October 2025. So yeah, you can pre-order from today, and that will be shipping next month, which is wonderful to see. So yeah, just a few action shots of the thing in action, I guess, so to speak. We've seen all of this. It doesn't talk about the CPU or the RAM or anything like that. No mention of any kind of SD card slot or ability to load your own games. I assume there probably isn't. Who knows if this thing's going to end up getting jailbroken or whatever with that USB-C port. You know, people adding the ability to add their own games and things. Perhaps that's going to be a thing in future. Obviously, it has Wi-Fi as well, so the potential for some kind of storefront. I don't think anything's kind of been announced as far as that is concerned either. So we'll just take a look at the built-in games for now. As you might expect from a modern-day Atari product, of course, we have all of the 2600 games on here. I say all of them, certainly an awful lot of them, and some really big names in there as well. Obviously, we've got Asteroids, we've got Basketball, we've got Berserk, we've got Breakout, Canyon Bomber, Centipede, Circus Atari, Combat, as you might expect, Crystal Castles, Dodge 'em. It's a really good selection of games. We've got Gravitar, Haunted House, Indy 500, Millipede, Missile Command, Night Driver. I need to stop looking at this list because I'm just reading them all now. We've got the 5200 games. Of course, that had that keypad controller, so that will take advantage of the keypad input on this. Centipede, Meebzork, that's not a game that I'd heard of. Sounds like something Clint would say. Millipede, Missile Command, of course, excellent port of that game on the 5200. We've got the real sports games on there as well. A few 7800 games. So we've got the 7800 version of Asteroids. Excellent port of Asteroids, that is. Centipede, Desert Falcon, Fatal Run. That's a great game. Food Fight, Motor Psycho, Ninja Golf. Ninja Golf, Scrapyard Dog. They're pretty much every single game that is kind of an exclusive or, unique or interesting on the 7800. A great opportunity to check those out, of course, if you don't have one of those consoles. I think a criminally underrated console in Atari history. And we, of course, also have, I keep saying of course, don't I, like these things are expected, but a selection of Atari arcade games as well. So we've got Asteroids again, Asteroids Deluxe. We've got baseball, football, soccer, basketball, Berserk, Canyon Bomber, Centipede, Crystal Castles, Drag Race, Food Fight, Lunar Lander, Millipede, Missile. Such a good selection of stuff on here. This is all looking really good. Super Breakout. No Activision games. I'm not seeing any Activision games on here. So stuff like River Raid, that kind of thing. Have I just overlooked that? Or, no, apparently not. Okay. So that's a bit of a shame, bit of a missed opportunity there. I guess that's a licensing issue. We've got the recharged versions of Asteroids, Berserk, Breakout, Centipede, and Missile Command, which add fancy graphics and stuff. Quite interesting games. I have checked them out. I think they're part of the Atari 50 collection, aren't they? We have some M Network games on here as well. So we've got Air Raiders, International Soccer, blah, 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 blah. Balls of Steel, which has 7 included pinball tables. We've got 3 different versions of Pac-Man. So we've got the 2600 version, classic mode, and something called Speed Up mode. That's quite interesting. Interesting challenge. We've got the Jaleco games, the 8-bit and 16-bit arcade games on here. Bases loaded. We've got... goodness, it's such a long list. We've got... yeah, there's the list. Kickoff, Skyfox, all sorts of great stuff. And yeah, we've got the Pico games on here as well. So I'm an Atari guy, not a Jaleco or Pico guy. So apologies for my lack of familiarity with that particular selection. But yeah, I mean, you know, it would be interesting to see what the feedback is on these once they start to get into the hands of reviewers. My arcades certainly have a decent enough reputation for the quality of their hardware and stuff, so I am expecting good things of this. Very interesting selection of controls and inputs on this, a very interesting selection of functionality, and a very interesting selection of games as well. So if they get it right, potential to be very, very good. $179.99 for pre-order. I promise this isn't an advert. I am just genuinely quite enthusiastic about this thing. Weird and wonderful as it is. Back in July of this year, I reported on a rather interesting story of quite a large collection of undumped and previously unknown prototypes that had come up for sale. And that there was a British game preservation group called the Video Game Preservation Museum, who are based up in Norwich, who were trying to raise some funds to acquire this collection and get it all kind of preserved for future study and for prosperity. Obviously, a lot of these flash cartridges and things use flash memory and stuff like that, which doesn't last forever. So quite important to get these prototypes dumped and people can look at them and learn from them, see the game development process and also the history of some of these very important cultural artifacts. So game preservation is something that I have always been very keen on, something I've always been a huge supporter of. And unfortunately, they never actually got their hands on the collection. There was a bit of a drama around this, and rather than trying to sort of sum all of this up again, it is covered rather nicely in this news story by Time Extension. So let's just take a look at that. Now, the headline here is Sega accused of using police to recover Nintendo dev kits it had negligently disposed of. That's right. So this is specifically concerning Nintendo hardware, and it's actually Sega that have involved the police in this and getting this stuff seized, which, okay. And the subheading here basically kind of shines a light on the era of stuff that we're looking at here. So DSi, 2DS, 3DS, Wii, and Wii U. So we're not even talking about current gen stuff. I mean, this stuff's well over 10 years old now. 20 years old in some cases. When did the DS come out? That was a very long time ago, wasn't it? So yeah, this is very much a legitimate preservation effort, and these games and things might never see the light of day now, which is incredibly sad. So yeah, the story goes on. Earlier this year, we reported on a fundraising drive by the non-profit preservation group, the Video Game Preservation Museum, to save a collection of undumped Game Boy Advance, DS, DSi, and 3DS games that were at risk of falling into the hands of private collectors. This haul of games included prototypes of titles such as Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood, Sonic Generations, Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympic Games, Phantasy Star Zero, Alien Infestation, Shinobi, and most exciting of all, an unreleased Nintendo DS version of Rhythm Thief and The Emperor's Treasure. In July, things took a turn for the worse, and it was reported that the seller of this collection was raided by British police, and the haul was seized. Time Extension can now reveal that the rumour is true, and that SEGA was involved in the process. SEGA, I mean, come on. I'm always singing Sega's praises in these rambles every week. I thought that they were one of the good guys, but is it Nintendo here pulling the strings behind the scenes? I'm not quite sure. The seller, who wishes to remain anonymous, obtained the collection as part of his business. I have been running an online resale business for many years, specialising in used electronics, whether fully working or sold for spares and repairs. My stock typically comes from office clearances, house clearances, recycling centres and scrapyards, he tells Time Extension. And so this is the original tweet. Game preservationists at the VGP Museum are trying to save 300 plus Sonic and Sega 3DS prototypes, which include Sonic Chronicles, Sonic Colors DS, Sonic Generations 3DS, and a never-before-seen DS prototype of Rhythm Thief. And we've got some photos here of these prototypes with these handwritten labels and stuff. Always wonderful to see these. Some of this stuff running on DSs as well. And apparently during a visit to one of his regular scrapyard contacts, a removals worker arrived with a van load of items that had reportedly come from Sega's office clearance. The company recently relocated its UK office from Brentford to the nearby Chiswick Business Park. Alongside sofas, fridges and other office furniture, it would appear that a large number of development consoles were present. I agreed a deal to purchase the consoles with the intention of reselling them online, exactly as I have done with countless other items over the past decades, says the seller. And he says that he paid around £10,000 for the items as well. So presumably he's out of pocket with this as well. A private investigator was actually approached him apparently around a month before the raid, pretending to be a prospective buyer. And this was apparently a private investigator who was hired by Sega themselves. And then on the 14th of July, his house was raided and he was arrested. And this was around 3 months after the purchase of the item. So I've got another quite decent picture here of these prototypes. Again, these lovely DS cartridges. Of course, they have the kind of standard-looking DS cartridge on one end with the contacts, as you might expect, that slots in. And then there's a big bulbous part that kind of sticks out of the end, which obviously contains the flash chips that they use for the testing the prototype games. So yeah, he was woken at around 7:30 a.m. by a loud knock at my door. When I opened it, I was met by approximately 10 officers from the City of London Police. They informed me that I was under arrest for money laundering and that they were there to seize development kits and game cartridges. I remained polite and fully cooperative throughout. In fact, during a later police interview, officers even expressed gratitude for how helpful I had been. I voluntarily disclosed that there were 2 additional consoles in my car, which they had not yet discovered. He was arrested, taken to the police station, had his DNA, fingerprints and photos taken, interviews, like I say, he told the police that he paid around £10,000 for this and it was just part of an office clearance. It seems very heavy-handed indeed. The story goes on. It's quite a long and involved story. I'm not going to sit here and read the entire thing, but that's the essential. That's essentially the gist of it. And of course, all of this stuff is now in police custody, and who knows what's going to happen to it. I know the police in the UK usually auction this stuff off, so maybe there's a chance that somebody will get a chance to buy it again. Maybe it'll be going back to Sega. I'm not sure. But the interesting part of this, of course, is that what they are specifically interested in is the Nintendo hardware itself, not necessarily the Sega games and things. So there's definitely something going on here behind the scenes. Having read this, I'm still not quite sure what's going on. But a bit of a blow for the world of game preservation, particularly as there was some stuff in here that was particularly unknown, previously unknown. And all of a bit of a sad story all around. Some guy who, it appears quite innocently, received this stuff as part of just a routine office clearance, paid quite a bit of money for it, and has now had it all confiscated at the request of Sega. So who knows? If there are any further developments, I will try to stay on top of this and keep you all updated, but not looking good at all at the moment. So from one rather unfortunate game preservation story to a rather more positive one now, and hopefully one that will develop in future and turn into something even more incredible. But for now, it's quite interesting in its own right. So this is a story over on gamesthatweren't.com, and it is concerning not a game that was under development back in the day, so to speak, but a rather more modern port from 2015 for the Commodore 64 that is still indeed very interesting in its own right. So let's go to gamesthatweren't.com and see what this is all about. So this is the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade port from 2015 to the Commodore 64 by Thorsten Harf. And he was working on the coding and the graphics, and the sound was being worked on by Joachim Weinhoven, I believe that's pronounced, and it's a name that I'm going to have to repeat a couple of times in this story. Not known for my pronunciation skills, I'm afraid, but anyway. Many of us played the Indiana Jones 3 platformer game on the Commodore 64, but missed out on the SCUM engine graphic adventure game that the 16-bit users got to enjoy. In 2012, that was set to change thanks to a developer called Brick Bambi, aka Thorsten Harf, who set themselves the very ambitious task of trying to convert the game to the Commodore 64. So this is a port of the SCUM point-and-click adventure game. Quite ambitious for the C64, I'm sure you'll agree. The attempt was pretty amazing, and a good-looking conversion was really coming together after a few weeks' work. Thorsten produced a series of videos showing the game in action and their progress, but then everything just stopped. On forum64.de, Oliver Lindau confirmed speaking with the developer at Gamescom 2018, and they had abandoned the project. Very sad to hear this overall, and it means that this homebrew conversion goes into the archives. We hope that someday we'll be able to see something of Thorsten's work in action and be able to play for ourselves, or even for them to come back to the project and consider finishing. It would, of course, be an amazing achievement to go alongside the Monkey Island conversion that is underway as of 2025. Now, as it happens, this has now been recovered, this prototype, and you can play it for yourself, which is really cool to see. And this is thanks to Joachim, who was working on the audio, as previously reported. So it's just the first episode of the game, and it is not entirely complete, apparently. There is a video of this in action over on YouTube, on the Games That Weren't YouTube channel, so we can have a click on this and take a look. And it's looking really good for the Commodore 64, isn't it? I mean, you've got all of your SCUM stuff, of course, SCUM being the engine that all of those old LucasArts point-and-click adventure games used, Monkey Island, that kind of stuff. So you've got your verbs here, you push, you pull, you give, you open, you close, and the rest of it. And the cursor, and of course you can go around the screen interacting with objects, as you might expect from a point-and-click adventure game. We've got all of the environments here, all kind of lovingly recreated on the Commodore 64. The sprites, the character sprites, the NPCs, all of that stuff. We've got all of the dialogue in here, the dialogue options, interact with various objects and things. It's looking like quite a complete game, isn't it? And unfortunately, the story behind this, as reported on Games That Weren't, is that the developer who was working on it had 3 young children and unfortunately just didn't have the time to get this finished. Massively ambitious project, really big technical challenge, and it was just taking up far too much of his time. And apparently hasn't been contactable since around 2021. So we are very lucky to have this prototype. Of course, the ideal would be to get our hands on the source code for this, so someone can pick this project up and continue to develop it. But at the moment, this is just a kind of pre-compiled binaries. So I did mention that you can go and download this and play it for yourself. And that is over on this website just here, csdb.dk. So this is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the graphic adventure preview. And this is on the Commodore 64. 8 votes so far. We've got a 10 out of 10 user rating. And we've got a download on here. So this is just a zip file. And presumably, if you have a flash cart for your C64 or some kind of emulator or Mister perhaps, you can download this and you can run it. Apologies, but I'm not a Commodore 64 expert. But there was talk, just going back to the Games That Weren't website, there was talk of actually getting this released as kind of a semi-official cartridge release for the C64, which would have been quite the impressive thing. And apparently that was discussed back in 2017. But the game was so complex that it could take many years. The limitation was not RAM or CPU, but time. He was very busy managing a family with 3 small children. So time to do the game was extremely limited. Thorsten's aim was to push on and complete the first chapter, the whole part until Castle Brunwald, apparently, and release it as a demo game for people to check out. Sadly, it never quite happened. And Yeah, the rest is history, as they say. There's also the music that the music that was actually produced for this isn't actually kind of included in this preview version that is available for download, but that has been made available for a separate download, or as a separate download as well, sorry, if you want to check out the progress on the music as well. So, yeah, interesting story. Like I say, a bit of a mixed bag, not quite as negative as our previous one. And if someone could, somehow get in touch with Thorsten and perhaps dig up those old source files. Shut up. Perhaps someone could pick this up and run with it and finally finish this game off. But as it stands, still an incredibly impressive technical achievement. I hope you'll agree. I think it's safe to say that I am not known, really, for my love of the theatre. I've certainly been and seen some quite interesting musicals and things, stage productions over the years, but not really a regular hangout for me, unfortunately, which is a shame because I do rather enjoy it when I do get to go along. But there was one production that I talked about earlier this year, which I thought was quite good. A bit of an underground thing, a bit of a daytime kind of matinee type thing. And, I think the audience consisted of about 10 people in total. But yeah, it was a musical to do with the rivalry between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs back in the 80s and the 90s, of course, Apple and Microsoft. And I actually found that it was quite surprisingly accurate, at least in kind of the major points, even if they did take some liberties with some of the finer points of the story for comedy effect, which I think is fine, as long as you're expecting that going in. And I talked about how much I enjoyed it and I recommended it. And, maybe some of you out there went and checked it out as a result of that. But I think it's fair to say that our industry, computing, isn't one that's very well represented in the world of the theatre. There are not really all that many productions about kind of computing and gaming history, which I think is quite surprising given what a huge kind of cultural, what the cultural importance of computers and gaming and all of that stuff. So I do like to shine a light on this kind of stuff when it does come up on my radar. Now, this is something that has been running for quite some time now. It started way back in 2012, and they've gone on a bit of a break, and they have brought it back for this summer, which is really cool to see. And there are only actually a couple of opportunities left to see this. Unfortunately, this has passed me by. It's only just come to my attention. But I did want to talk about this a little bit. And this one is called Together in Electric Dreams. And it's a production by Scythe Plays Limited, and it is based on the downfall of Sinclair. That's a giant of British computing history that it is. And of course, its acquisition, its rescue by the great Alan Sugar, back in the day, of course, of Amstrad. And we shall proceed to the website and see what they have to say. So this summer, for the first time in 10 years, Scythe Plays will present a new production of Together in Electric Dreams, Daniel Thackeray's acclaimed fact-based comedy drama from an original idea by Gareth Kavanagh. The show will be touring across the Northwest for several dates in between July and September, and then playing in London for a one-off performance in October. And as I say, there is an opportunity to catch these if you are quick. So it's 1986. Sir Clive Sinclair, renowned British inventor of the first ever home computer. Inventor of the first ever home computer? Okay. The pocket calculator and the C5 electric vehicle is on the verge of bankruptcy. His only option is to meet rival billionaire Alan Sugar and convince him to save the day. But will this business brokerage in a karaoke cafe turn out to be a deal with the devil? And will Sir Clive have to sing for his supper? We have some reviews here from the Manchester Evening News, who said it was a lot of laughs and worth a trip down memory lane. And the Oldham Chronicle, a prestigious publication that it is, described it as interesting throughout. The central battle is an enjoyable one. No higher praise indeed. The play is suitable for audiences aged 15 and over, as it contains swearing and mild sexual references. Whew. The tour dates and venues are as follows, and this has been touring over the summer. It's a shame I didn't pick up on this earlier. But they've done a few dates in July across the north of England, a couple of dates in August, and they are playing in Oldham on the 20th of September, so that's in a week's time. If you want to go check that out on Saturday, 2:30 p.m, so nice civilised time in the afternoon. And they are playing at the Space, which is in the Isle of Dogs in London on the 4th of October, Saturday the 4th of October as well. The new production is directed by Ross Kelly and features 2 returning actors from the 2015 production, Steve Kane as Alan and Daniel Thackeray as Sir Clive. Very convincing. We've got a photo of them here. They certainly do look the part. And yeah, they've got an image at the top of the article, which was designed by Colin Brockhurst. Rather nice 8-bit Spectrum colour palette type image of course, the great men themselves, Sir Clive Sinclair and Lord Sir, whatever he is this week, Alan Sugar. So yeah, the computing history, woefully underrepresented in the theatre world, and always an entertaining trip out. So I might see if I can try to organise a trip maybe to see one of these while I still can. But if I don't get the opportunity, of course, I could always go back and watch Micro Men, and I always take the opportunity to promote this because this was actually a BBC thing way back in 2009, and it's not actually available officially anywhere. Despite how fantastic it is, but it is on YouTube somehow, and it has survived all of these years. Largely unscathed by the BBC, which seems odd, but hey, I'm certainly not going to complain. It stars Martin Freeman and Alexander Armstrong, 2 very well-known British comedians, of course. And it covers a little bit kind of earlier Sinclair history. So this is the rivalry between Sinclair and Acorn specifically, and it is a fantastic thing. It's kind of a comedy drama type production. Just laughing at how ridiculous Alexander Armstrong here looks as Sir Clive, but also well worth checking out. And like I say, something I always like to take the opportunity to point out whenever I can. Anyway, that's Together in Electric Dreams. A couple of dates left, and will be linked in the usual places if you fancy going and having a little trip to the theatre at some point in the next couple of weeks. Now, as you can probably tell, I am still kind of suffering from this cold that I talked about last week. It is lingering, although I think it's getting better. I hope it's getting better. But of course, the show must go on, and I had to deliver a ramble this week. But one thing that we absolutely cannot do without, come hell or high water, no matter what happens, is of course my video of the week, wherein I recommend a video which I have watched here on the YouTubes in the past week that has entertained or enlightened or educated or otherwise improved my life in some way. Quite often they are retro and vintage computing and gaming related, quite often they aren't. Quite often there's one, and quite often there is more than one. And I'm pleased to report that I have 3 videos for you this week, and it's a very mixed bag indeed. 2 very old school YouTubers that I want to shine a bit of a light on, people you've almost definitely heard of and whose videos you've almost definitely watched in the past. And there's a bit of a curveball as well, something that's also very, very old school. So without further ado, as they say in the world of YouTube, let's dive into this. Now, this is a video by AVGN, the Angry Video Game Nerd, and this guy predates YouTube. I remember watching his videos, back in like 2006 or whenever it was. I mean, it was 20 years ago, dear God. James Rolfe, of course, and his channel has been on quite the journey over the years. Of course, it got acquired by some big media production company, and I think the quality of his stuff kind of went a bit awry, and a lot of people stopped watching at that point. And he's one that's kind of always been on my radar, but I'm not a regular viewer. But evidently, this one has been recommended to quite a lot of people. It has over 700,000 views, and indeed, one of those people was me. It came up on my YouTube homepage, and I thought, you know what? That's something that looks interesting. I haven't watched any of this guy's videos in quite a while. Let's give it a chance. And I found it rather entertaining, rather crass, rather crude, and rather stupid, as you might expect from AVGN. But I actually quite enjoy that kind of stuff from time to time. So this is a review of Mario Paint, which of course is the paint and music making package on the SNES, the SNES. And when I say review, of course, it is done in his rather unhinged and chaotic style. But there is some really cool artwork on this, and some really nice musical arrangements as well, of course, because it has that whole built-in music tracker that you can use. And speaking of music, it does have an appearance from Bob Ross as well. Speaking of music, by the end of the video, he also gets Gwar involved, the metal band, the guys that dress up as demons. And the whole thing takes a bit of a turn, which was completely unexpected for me when I was sat watching this on my TV the other night, all 22 minutes of it. And as you might expect, it just descends into complete and utter chaos. Lots and lots of very bad language in this, and bodily fluids and references and things. But I don't know. Nice to see an old school YouTuber still very much, putting out the same kind of stuff. And this guy doesn't age at all, does he? I know I mention that every time I mention AVGN, but yeah, he's doing all right. So that is that. Also, there was the Angry Video Game Nerd movie as well a few years back. I have to mention that because it is genuinely one of the most awful things I've ever seen. So if you can seek that out and give it a watch, yeah, maybe don't. Anyway, the next video I have for you is very much in a different vein. And this is a review of a device called the VidPix. This is Techmoan, of course. I'm sure you're probably familiar with his work. Another old school YouTuber, a giant of the British YouTube scene. And yeah, he did actually have some health problems and stuff earlier on this year, which thankfully he has overcome, which is great to see. I've always been a huge supporter of his. And I have been kind of watching the behind the scenes stuff that he's been putting out on Patreon. He's also moved into his new studio now, which is really fantastic to see, and very much back up and running. So this is the VidPix, and this will be of particular interest if you enjoyed my coverage of the Atari video music back in the day. Of course, my music visualizer that I purchased from America and got shipped over from the 1970s. One of the more interesting bits of hardware that Atari has produced. Nothing to do with gaming at all, although it does share some DNA, some ancestry with the 2600. But no, you plug it into your hi-fi and you plug it into your TV, and it makes psychedelic patterns appear on the screen in time with the music, and is known for being the very first hardware music visualizer, or I say hardware, obviously the software music visualizers wouldn't have existed at the time. So yeah, the very first music visualizer, which is really cool. And this is a clone of this VidPix. So this is available on Etsy. You can buy it as a kit or as a complete unit. And a very, very thorough review here, as you might expect from Matt. And, it replicates the functionality of the video music rather nicely. I found it very, very reminiscent indeed of that device, and also adds some modern bits and pieces as well. It adds this rather cool mode that uses 8-bit game sprites as part of the kind of animation. So we've got like the characters from Bubble Bobble and some stuff from Zelda and stuff like that as well, kind of flashing up on the screen. We've got some, different modes with different shapes and text-based things and stuff as well, which I think all adds to the experience. So I thought this was a very cool device. I thought this was a very good review. The kind of thing that I would actually quite like to cover on my channel as well, but he's done such a good job of it that I think it would be redundant at this point. He does also mention, I believe, that there is some potential for programming, for hacking this thing, for modifying it, for people to add their own improvements and things to this. I should have said there are some flashing images in this, by the way. I'll pause that. So that's also potential for the future, for the VidPix. But if nothing else, just a really interesting device to check out, and really nice to see Techmoan back up and running, firing on all cylinders, and back to his old self as cool, which is really cool. And finally, my third video of the week for you is another random recommendation. I actually watched this. I woke up really early the other morning and I couldn't get back to sleep. And I put my TV on and I thought, you know what, let's just watch some random stuff on YouTube. And this was a recommendation from the BBC Archive. And it was actually produced the year that I was born, in 1984, which is why it kind of took my interest. It's a classic BBC documentary called 40 Minutes, Voices in a City. And it's essentially just a collection of interviews with people which were conducted in 1984, just people talking about life in Britain in that year. Of course, it's the year I was born, so I very much do not remember that year, but very much of interest to me. But I think one of the interesting aspects of this is how computers are kind of starting to appear in day-to-day life. And there's a lot of talk, a surprising amount of talk in this. I mean, it's getting on for 40 minutes long, about computers and about how they are kind of starting to be integrated into people's lives, how they've kind of impacted people's lives as well. Not necessarily home computers, but stuff like the National Police computer was a new thing that was introduced around this time, and there's quite an interesting interview with someone about that and about some early cock-ups that system made, and talk about surveillance and CCTV and buying British, patriotism and all that stuff. I think it it's amazing how much life changes and yet how much it stays the same, particularly over 41 years. So, not just of interest to people who have an interest in that specific year, or indeed people who are British. I mean, if you want a very interesting little slice of life, of course, very well produced, some excellent bits of footage in here, bits of B-roll, and, in early 80s Britain in all its glory, I can recommend it. Bit of a weird one for me, but I actually really liked it. So there you go. We have a angry video game nerd review full of bad language and all sorts of vile stuff, all sorts of good stuff. We have the VidPix, a clone of the Atari video music, as covered by one of my favourite YouTubers, Matt from Techknown, of course. And finally, a 40-minute documentary from the BBC about life in Britain in 1984 that does cover a fair bit of computing stuff, so very much on topic as well, I guess. Anyway, they will be linked in the usual places if you want to go and check them out. Those usual places are being down in the description if you are watching this on my second YouTube channel at youtube.com/ReeseRambles, or indeed in the show notes if you are listening to this on your favourite podcast platform. And so, sadly, as is always the case with these things, our time together this week must draw to a close. Perhaps a little bit prematurely this week, I will say, just as a result of me feeling a little bit under the weather, and I've got to get this edited up and get it out to you lovely people. But of course, the ramble must go on, and I have very much enjoyed sitting down and recording this for you. So thank you ever so much for joining me. And this goes out on my second YouTube channel, as mentioned, youtube.com/ReeseRambles. Also on the podcast platforms. I think it's on pretty much all of the podcast platforms. Let me know if it's not on your favourite platform, and I'll try to sort it out for you. And so this goes out on a Friday night at 2 minutes to midnight every single week, UK time. And also, a lot of the stories are sourced from my Discord server. I do find my own stories as well. I do like to point that out. But there are a lot of wonderful people over there submitting all sorts of fascinating stuff. And of course, I also have to say a big thank you to them. So a big thank you to Matthias Bayes, the retro SEGA dev, for your correction on my Sega Mega Drive controller, the Lego story from last week. And he does have a very interesting looking game in development and his own YouTube channel. So I will link to that down below if you want to go check that out. James Encott, again, he's also a YouTuber. Naoki, another YouTuber. That's interesting. Steve's Tech Shed. Lots of YouTubers taking part in this. That's always great to see, isn't it? Nice community. We've got Manemo, of course, as always. How can we forget Manemo? Technic. And also this week, a submission from Flod. Now, I have actually literally only just sat down and watched this. I wasn't quite sure what it was, and it wasn't what I was expecting at all. But I'm also going to link to this down below as well, because this is rather sweet. It's a music video from an artist called April Klux, and it's called Goodbye Computer. And it has this rather nice IBM NetVista setup here. And it's just a really nice, twee, nostalgic song about the good old days of computing in the, the 90s, the dial-up days, Windows 95, all of that. And how those days are sadly long behind us. And I thought it was quite kind of wistful and quite whimsical, really. Actually rather enjoyed this. So I'm going to link to that as well. I'm not going to play it as part of this. I haven't been in touch with the artist, so I don't have permission for that. But very much recommend it, and please do go and send some views her way as well, because I think it's rather creative and rather sweet. But anyway, that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble. So thanks once again, and I will hopefully see you feeling a little bit better in the same time and the same place next week. Bye!